What's going on, gardeners? It is Tuesday, March 1st, and it is the first day of meteorological spring here on the southeastern coast of North Carolina, and I can't get tomatoes off of my mind because of it. So today I'm going to show all of you some tips and tricks where you can plant your tomato transplants 1 to 2 months earlier for the earliest tomato harvest you have ever had in your entire life. If you're new to the channel, please consider subscribing and hitting the bell to receive new video notifications, and check out our Amazon storefront and spread shop in the video description for a list of the gardening products I use and awesome custom designed apparel and other gear. Your support is greatly appreciated. These first few warm days of March where we get this wonderful spring-like weather really makes us want to just jump out and start planting things in our garden as soon as possible. But the truth of the matter is, in most areas of the country that are highly prone to frost and freeze, these warm spells are known as a false spring, because while it may be warm for a week or two, what usually happens 2 weeks from now is the temperatures will plummet back down and you can get frost and freeze that can kill your tender plants. That being said, there are still some steps that we can all take where we can have dramatically earlier harvests no matter what our climate is. The first thing we need to do is we need to consult the average last frost date for our region, and I prefer using the website WeatherSpark for that because they have a tremendous database of growing season information, and down at the bottom they have a growing season length based on your 50% frost date. What a 50% frost date is, in any given year there's a 50-50 shot that there will be a frost after that year. So only half the years in recorded history are you clear of frost at that point. I like to wait closer to my 75 to 80% frost date before I plant anything out in the garden, because I want to be able to look into the 10-day forecast, which is usually reasonably accurate, make sure there isn't some big Arctic plunge coming, and after that point I'm usually pretty confident that we won't have any frosts or freezes in the forecast. Right now I am only at about my 20% frost date, so planting anything out into the ground right now is highly at risk for damage from frost and freeze. While there is no way to beat Mother Nature, there are some ways that you can work around her. And in every year for the past couple of years, I have shown you different ways where you can plant early tomato plants and get a 2-month jump start on the growing season if you're willing to put in just a little bit of time and effort for a huge reward. A couple of weeks ago, I published a video that is a complete growing guide on starting your tomato seeds and other warm weather seed transplants. Here you can see my tomato seedlings. They are about on week 4, so they have a little bit more time to go before they are perfect for transplanting out in the garden. And I will make sure to link to a video above so you know exactly how to start your seeds if you haven't done so already. When it comes to your normal tomato transplants, what you want to do is you want to plant the seed 8 weeks before your last comfortable frost date, which for many of us will be about that 75 to 80% frost date, because at that point you can look 10 days into the future and you can be pretty confident that you will be out of the cold weather sans a really crazy confluence of events. For me, my 80% frost date is about March 25th. So I always start my tomato seeds 8 weeks before March 25th, and my goal is to plant them out in the garden on that date. However, for me, it's not enough to be merely average. I want to try to get 1 to 2 months ahead of schedule. And to do that, I also start just a handful of tomato plants 12 to 16 weeks before my 80% frost date, because I want to try and plant them 1 to 2 months ahead of time and kind of bypass Mother Nature to get a really early harvest. And I've showed you how to do that in the past. And what I do is this: I start a handful of early determinate or dwarf style tomatoes that have only somewhere between 50 and 65 days to maturity, because those are very early ripening varieties. And then I start them 16 weeks ahead of my 75 to 80% frost date, and then about 1 to 2 months early before my last frost date, I will plant them in one of these grow bags, something like a 7-gallon grow bag, and I'll keep 2 or 3 of those plants, and I will simply carry them inside my garage if it's going to be a freezing night, and I will carry them back outside during the day as temperatures allow. Because usually when you're 30 to 45 days out from your last frost date, freezes and frosts become infrequent, and most nights you can just leave them out unattended with nothing to fear. And even if you are going to get a frost or freeze, you simply carry them inside your garage or inside your kitchen or wherever you have space, and then you bring them right outside during the day. Because when you are 30 to 45 days away from your last frost date, you're usually getting beautiful, comfortable outside temperatures that your tomatoes will benefit from. So that is how I normally do that, and I've showed you how to do that in the past. However, this year I have the most incredible early March forecast I have ever seen, and the 15-day forecast is nothing but clear. So I'm going to take an extra big risk, and I'm going to plant a few tomato plants that I can afford to lose in ground, but with some added protection as an insurance policy in case we were to get a last-minute light freeze or frost. And I am going to show you how to do that now. Now, it wouldn't be one of my tomato planting tutorials without going over fertilizing, and I go with two main basic fertilizers that are organic. I always go with an organic granulated. This is a 356, but you can go with an NPK of 555, 444, 454. It doesn't matter. Just make sure all NP and K are represented and the numbers are close together, and it is a granulated organic type. Then I always like to supplement with bone meal, which is a very strong source of organic phosphorus and calcium that is great for the establishing of transplants, and it will also help prevent blossom end rot as it slowly decomposes all season long. Then I'm also going to use this crab shell meal, which I purchased this year, and I used to use lobster and crab shell meal in the past. I have to get back to doing this because I did find a location last year that had some root knot nematodes clearly visible on some tomato roots. So I can't grow in that bed this year, and I'm going to place this in all of my planting holes because it contains a compound called chitin that helps keep root knot nematodes away. So if you have an issue with RKNs, consider this product. If you need these as well as my other fertilizers, I have them and similar products like that linked in my Amazon storefront in the video description. Now that all the planting holes have been done, they couldn't be any easier to fertilize. We're simply going to place 2 tablespoons of the organic granulated fertilizer in each hole. One tablespoon of the bone meal in each hole. And 1 tablespoon of the crab shell meal in each planting hole. Then we're going to mix the fertilizers in each planting hole until they're evenly distributed. One of the most important tips that anyone can give when it comes to planting tomato plants is to bury them as deep as possible. And that's because all of these hairs along the neck of the tomato, they will all turn into roots when exposed to consistently moist soil. So I dig my planting holes very deep and I backfill them because I want as much of that stem to be exposed as possible. That will lead to rapid, strong root development. And I also want to keep the tomatoes low to the ground because I want to cover them in case we get any last minute frosts or freezes. And that is the biggest tip that I'm going to give you on how you can keep these plants alive. But before that, I'm going to top dress every one of these tomato plants with half a tablespoon more of the granulated organic fertilizer. Then I'm going to pool all of the mulch around my tomato plants. And if you don't have mulch around your tomato plants, go get yourself some kind of organic or natural mulch, like a hardwood bark mulch, some straw that has little to no weed seeds in it, things like that. Any kind of natural mulch will do. Just don't use dyed mulch or rubber mulch. Then we're going to water all of the new transplants in with soluble fertilizers, and the soluble fertilizers help tremendously because with those organic fertilizers, the soil microbiology has to break them down, and that can take weeks or months. These soluble fertilizers are immediately available to the plants, and I'm going to start off with using Miracle-Gro Tomato, which is 18-18-21, and I'm going to use the recommended dosage of 1 tablespoon per gallon. Then I'm going to add 1 tablespoon of Epsom salt, which I really only use at planting time and when they first start setting their heavy fruit. You don't really need to use it other than that. And then we will give it a healthy glug of Alaska fish fertilizer, one of my favorite things to use in the garden. And no, products like Miracle Grow will not harm your garden. They are synthesized fertilizers. They're not synthetic. They will not hurt your soil. They will not hurt your plants as long as you use them in the concentrations directed. That goes for any fertilizer. You can harm your soil with organic fertilizers as well if you use too much. You have to use the appropriate amount, and there's nothing to worry about. If you do not like the Miracle Grow brand for whatever reason, you can use a product like Job's or Jack's, which I also have linked in my Amazon storefront. Alright, now all my tomatoes are planted and fertilized, but what do I do if I get a frost or freeze because I'm 3 to 4 weeks away from my last frost date? Well, I'm going to cover them in these milk jug greenhouses. These are just empty milk jugs or empty water jugs that I cut the bottom out of, and I save the lids on the top. And these are going to be highly protective of my tiny seedlings. So all you're going to do is you're going to pull the mulch layer away, and you are going to place this milk jug right over top of your tomato seedling, and you're going to turn it a little bit to embed it into the ground, and then you're going to bring the mulch around that milk jug, and that is going to be your frost protection in case you were to get a frost. Now during the day these are going to get very warm, so you're going to want to take that top off so that way you let the heat out so they won't overheat during the day. And the cool thing about this is at this point in the year, it's nice and warm out compared to what it was in the winter, but it's still not at the temperatures that tomatoes like to be at to grow. They like to be in the 70s and the 80s, and these milk jugs will help them achieve that. So you can leave the caps off all the time unless you think there's a chance of frost. Then you simply go ahead and you place the cap on them. We don't really have any chance of frost coming up for the next week or two, so I'm just going to leave the caps off, and I'm going to set it right there just in case we were to get a frost or freeze event. Now this method is all well and good if you were to get a light frost or a light freeze where you dip down to 31, 32 degrees. But what happens if you get colder? What happens if you get a hard freeze at 28 degrees? Then what do? This will not be a sufficient protection method. Well, that actually happened to us last year. Last year, we got one of the latest hard freezes on record. We got down to 28 degrees Fahrenheit the first week of April, which is nearly a month after our last hard freeze date and past our 90% frost date. So that could have devastated my garden. However, I found a very effective solution. First of all, with these milk jug greenhouses, you will want to take mulch, if you have it, and you will want to stack that high around the greenhouses. Bury them as much as you can because the mulch will hold in thermal mass. Then you will want to take one of these 5-gallon Lowe's or Home Depot buckets, and you will place that on top of the milk jug. And what you're going to get is you're going to get a double greenhouse effect. You're going to get an outer layer, an oxygen buffer, another greenhouse layer with the milk jug greenhouse, and the added thermal mass from both the ground heat and from the warmth of the mulch itself. And if you think there's going to be any wind, I recommend you put a brick or a stone or something to weigh this down to make sure that if you get a very late Arctic outbreak, nothing blows away. Doing this, I was able to keep all of my tomatoes with virtually no damage in a 28-degree April hard freeze. It is Saturday, March 12th, and just like I warned in the beginning of the video, that beautiful stretch of warm weather that we had was a false spring here on the southeastern coast of North Carolina. We are going to get a freeze tonight, but this is not going to be just any freeze. This is going to be potentially record cold that is reaching all the way down to central Florida. We're supposed to hit a low of 23 degrees tonight, which is far more than I bargained for when it comes to protecting these sensitive tomato plants. So this will be a fantastic opportunity to test just how well these methods of cold protection work, because if we can defend against 23 degrees, we can really plant our tomatoes very early. So this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to pull the mulch away from the tomato plant. I'm going to place one of these 1-gallon water jugs on top of the tomato plant, and I'm going to put the cap on, and then I'm going to take mulch and I'm going to pile the mulch all up and down the sides of the water jug to make sure that no air and warmth leaks out. Then I'm going to place one of these 5-gallon paint buckets from Lowe's or Home Depot on top of the water jug, and then I'm going to try and grind it into the mulch layer a little bit and then pack more mulch around it. So I'm going to have a double layer greenhouse effect to try to lock in the warmth from the ground. And because this cold front is going to be accompanied with really bad winds, we're going to place bricks on top of the 5-gallon paint bucket so nothing blows away. It's Monday, March 14th, and we got down to 24.1 degrees on Saturday night. But not only did we get a bad freeze Saturday night, but we also got down to 28.9 degrees last night. So we had 2 hard freezes in the 20s. And these tomato plants have been covered the entire time. So now we get to uncover things and get the big reveal. Was this method successful at protecting my tomatoes with such extreme temperatures? So let's find out. And look at that. This tomato plant is 100% fine. There is no damage on it at all. That is pretty astounding, but are all of them going to be this way? So here is the first tomato plant. It has no damage on it at all. Here is the second tomato plant. Also no damage on it. Here is the third tomato plant. No damage on it at all. Then we have the fourth tomato plant. It looks like there may be a little bit of damage on that one leaf on the bottom right, possibly, but that's going to obviously be no problem at all long term. It'll grow right out of that. And then finally here is the fifth tomato plant. Again, absolutely no damage at all. So every single one of these tomato plants made it through the freeze with flying colors. And that right there, ladies and gentlemen, is a way that you can plant your tomato plants up to a month early, maybe even more than a month early, depending on the mildness of your climate. When I began filming this, I never thought I would be able to test this method in real time with such a severe hard freeze, but as you can see, this method will protect pretty easily down to 24 degrees Fahrenheit, and who knows, it may even be able to go a little further. Now, because we did that, I will be able to get a massive jump on my growing season for my tomatoes, assuming we don't get any more severe freezes. But if we do, chances are they're not going to be as cold as the one we just got, and I now know a foolproof way to protect them moving forward. So everybody, thank you so much for watching this video. If you found it helpful, please make sure to hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and ring that notification bell so you're notified when we release more videos like these. If you're curious about any of the products I use in my garden, they are all linked in my Amazon storefront link in the video description, so check it out for everything I use in my garden. And while you're there, check out the Spreadshop link for custom merch if you want to support the channel. Thank you all so much for watching, and I hope to see all of you again on the next video. Oh boy, Dale, we just filled up all of your kibble. Oh, that looks good, doesn't it? What is this? This is pumpkin and duck recipe. Ooh, everybody loves pumpkin and duck. Come here. What do you think, buds? What do you think? What do you think? No, 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 you funny boy. No funny business. No funny business. This is way too big of a food bowl for you. We're going to put this back in the closet.